we're going to talk about the Latin American market and what glocalization, the sort of a buzzword, actually means, specifically to the music. So we're starting with the hypothesis that 10 years ago, a bit like in retail, we thought that, oh, we're going to have streaming, music streaming. And yeah, just like retail, we're going to have the same shops in every single city. Everyone's going to listen to the same North American global content. But the fact is that we went global, and more than ever, local content has been discovered, sourced, and there's a very specific scenario with Latin America. So I'm lucky to be here with my panelists that are a perfect description of that region, right? I'm going to let you present yourselves, starting with you, Cris. Good. Ladies first.
Well, first of all, thank you, Coralie, for the invite. I'm super honored to be here in Belgium, talking about Latin America. I'm Cris Falcão. My whole story would take a few minutes to say, so I'll just cut a long story short. Now I work for Virgin Music Group, an independent division of Universal Music Group, and I handle the whole Latin America and Iberia on this independent scene that I do love. I'm from Brazil, but I'm based in Miami now because we understand that Miami is super interesting now for exploit this Latin content from Brazil and different regions. So I'm here now. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Felix. I'm from Chile, but I'm based in Helsinki now. I'm the founder of the MusicTech Association of Chile. Since I'm not living in Chile, I'm not the president anymore. We have a new president and new board, but I'm still part of the board. I'm kind of the ambassador for Europe for the MusicTech Association. I also lead market research for Neural DSP. It's like the biggest music tech company in Finland at the moment, and the founders are from Chile. So it's a cool story. And I'm also the founder of Measurevent, an impact measurement service for events and festivals, but I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow in the live music sustainability panel.
All right. Oh, mine isn't working. Sorry. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carly, again, and thanks to all the Fornia team to having invited us here. I'm Pedro. I am Director Content for the Americas, so that means United States, Canada, Latin America, all along. Been a Deezer for almost 4 years now, so long journey, and I will spare you the details of my professional career because as Chris's, it's such a long story, I'd rather tell it elsewhere. Thank you.
All right. So the point being, we have a nice representation of different roles within the ecosystem, and I think it's important to specify that we have Brazil, Portuguese-speaking and Spanish-speaking. All right, so what is, maybe starting with you, Pedro, actually all of you, how do you describe this movement from, again, this hypothesis, we're going to go global, we're going to have only global content listened to because of streaming, and actually not at all. Like, how have you experienced it from a music streaming perspective, from a label perspective, and even from a music tech perspective, because we are at a tech conference?
I can start? Okay. So yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a little while now, user consumption has been shifting over years. So from a decade until now, from 2012, 2013 until this very year, we're seeing a lot more local content on the charts as opposed to global content being on the top of the charts back in the beginning of music streaming. So we can attribute a lot of different variables for that one, but I would say mainly it has to do with relatability. So culture in essence is made within the country and by the people of the country. And it's natural that people, whenever they're looking at the artist, they want to see themselves as well. They want to see their culture. So it's no wonder, it's funny, right? Because we thought about this 10 years ago and everyone is like, oh, it's gonna be super global and there's no room for local artists anymore because global platforms are gonna dominate everything. But I think the beauty about music streaming is it's basically power to the people. So we give people a wide catalog of songs which they can choose from and stream whatever they want, whenever they want. So I think for us as a music streaming platform, and I'm sure Cris has a lot of other details to share, it's about relatability. People are seeing themselves and seeing them culture in the artists and then streaming that, which generates this very, very fortunate cycle.
Well, I mean, from the region I come from, Brazil, historically, we always consume more our local content. And so this is not so new for us, but we are seeing this momentum for Latin America in general, like this local consumption. I would say that in the past, I mean, we were like flooded by the majors with Anglo content. So all the investments, everything went to the Anglo content. And now we are seeing more and more from a label perspective, a kind of autonomy from the local leaders to manage their local content with investments, deciding the genre they want to focus on. So I think it's more about like a different movement from the whole industry. But I mean, it's important for us to have this local culture being exploited, because when you reinforce your local culture, it's easier to exploit abroad. So it's an interesting movement.
Yeah, I would say that it has, if you look back in time, it has a lot to do with politics, policies, geopolitics. Like if you see the case of Brazil, you had like a law to push like 40% of Brazilian music like in the 60s or something. So policies also influenced the local consumption, and you are like very rooted to your musical genres. On the other side, like in Chile, we've only had a law for 20% of Chilean music on the radio since like, I don't know, less than 10 years. And if you see the case of Argentina, the Argentinian rock scene became big because of the Falklands conflict, the Islas Malvinas conflict, because they banned all music in English. So they started programming local rock, and culture is also very different. Like in Chile, we're not like nice to our local artists, and like we tend to consume the big names, the big artists, the mainstream stuff. In Brazil, you listen to your local artists. Maybe you're not as crazy about them as Argentinians, who treat their artists as gods, and also their football players. So yeah, I would say it has a lot to do with culture, policies, and geopolitics.
For sure, we can't generalize all countries of Latin America. I think it's a very good point to precise that. But, you know, when it comes to monetizing that, how do you explain, you know, what's the current status basically, and how do you monetize a territory? Like, I think I'd be interested in hearing your perspectives on the monetization, specifically.
Okay, so I'll start. I think one thing that we've been doing, and I'm not going to speak only about our initiatives, but I think as a whole, the market needs to be seen differently. We're talking about a region that was colonized for over 3 centuries, 350 years. Some of them were even becoming independent by the end of the 20th century. So it's important to take that into context and really understand what the market needs. So it's different when you compare it to North America and Europe, where, you know, in North America it was also colonized, but the idea was that they're building a country for themselves. In Latin America, it was like an exploitation colony. So everything was taken away, and that creates a culture of scarcity. People do not know whether they'll have money to pay for all their bills at the end of the month, so let alone music subscription, right? So our idea, and then our goals exactly now is to provide music to a population that lives in a paradox, actually, because if you think about it, in Latin America, everyone loves music, and it's such a big part of the culture. Like, everyone is dancing to music and listening to music. Like, we can see in our internal tools how larger is the engagement and the time spent listening in Latin American countries as opposed to North America, to some countries in Europe. So we need to find ways for those people to learn about music subscription, because it's also supporting the artists and the community in a way that it's affordable to them. So we've been creating a lot of new initiatives with B2B partners like Tim, Mercado Libre, you know, many partners in different sectors of the economy in Latin America, and providing music subscription to an audience that cannot afford for it right now. But we want to create that habit of paying little by little for music in a way that in 7 years from now or 10 years from now, we get a much more mature market. So I think it has to do with that.
Yeah, I also think that unfortunately our region is the corruption is something super strong. So historically also, I mean, we were not properly educated for some things because you think, should I pay tax or this tax goes to the bad cops? I mean, something like that. Anyway, so I think that we didn't educate people enough, I mean, in the region to pay for music. So it's a process that, having said that, we are evolving, so we are seeing even more people paying for music, for DSPs and streaming platform for movies, etc. But I think this is something that it's important to mention. So the monetization in these regions are pretty bad still. I mean, we have a lot to grow. But also, this is an opportunity for us because we have a plan of space, a room to grow these regions. But the main impact, I mean, for me, is education that is key to evolve the industry.
Yeah, and I think that we skipped a whole stage of the business models for music consumption because, you know, after Napster and everything, then iTunes came, and that was never available in South America. Like you couldn't pay for songs on iTunes that wasn't available, and then you had also problems of access to international credit cards in some countries. Now it's way better, but you know, all that stage when people made up their mind about like, okay, I have to use a digital method or like to get a digital asset to consume music. Like we skipped maybe 10 years, so the payment culture is behind, and we went straight to subscriptions.
Absolutely. I think, like, just to add on top of that, what I think is a possible way for us to move forward, given all the circumstances we have in Latin America, right? Payment methods, payment fraud, which is a big deal in Latin America. We're combating it, you know, day by day. There's been a lot of evolution in so many countries, like in payment systems and payment safety. And the way we've been doing this now is like partnering up with companies that can see a benefit in music subscription, and all of our partners see a great benefit because whenever a telco offers a bundle, like so you're an ordinary customer and you get offered to have a bundle with Deezer for very little money on a monthly basis. Those who choose that bundle and use our service, they tend to churn a lot less. We've seen levels of 35 to 40% less churn of users that are bundled with us, and as opposed to users who do not have Deezer activated within our partners. So it's a great deal for them because it helps them feed their business environment, and it helps also all of us in the music industry, to foster the market and to really foster the artists and be able to release more tracks.
I'm hearing, if I'm doing a little, wait, first of all, what's in terms of timing? I have no watch. Is there some kind of, you'll wave at me because we're very talkative. Oh, perfect. All right, sorry. So I'm hearing, if I do a little, since we're in the middle of time, a little recap on the keywords we've been hearing. Oh, 10 minutes. I'm hearing there's a necessity of relatability to the content. You've all mentioned autonomy as being, essential. And what I hear a lot is this education, this necessity to educate not just the users, but maybe also the partners. And again, we are at a tech conference, so how can we together grow, let's say, the structure and the professionalization, I guess, of the industry? How do we better educate users? So you're saying that with bundling, you're basically educating to pay for content. Are there other use cases that you would suggest or that are needed that maybe the community here at California can contribute to? You're the tech.
Okay, maybe at a more institutional scale. What we've done with the MusicTech Association in Chile, like one of the main challenges is actually to explain people what is music tech. And to talk about music tech, you need to explain them what is the music industry, what's the value chain, how the business works. Because if you're talking to the public sector or some chamber of commerce or, I don't know, a big company, big brands, etc., like you need to explain those things. They think music, it's just, oh, it's funny, it's nice, but yeah, what do you really work in? Like, it's nice as a hobby.
It's a classic, right?
So that's a huge deal, like how to explain in a simple way the value chain and the business, and how to make them see that it's a valuable business, a valuable opportunity. And actually that's how I ended up moving or pivoting into market research, because in the MusicTech Association, in the Music Industry Association, we needed like indicators to prove, to validate the worth of the music business, of the music industry. So we had to come up with our own methodologies and reports. That's also how we ended up creating the Digital Observatory for Chilean Music, which is a public-private project that generated methodologies and reports for recorded music, live music, and music tech, to have these resources, these indicators, and actually for the pandemic that was very important, because with the data that we had, we could prove how the sector was being affected by the pandemic and why we needed aid and grants just as much as any other sector.
I always ask when I sign an artist, like, do you know the difference between title and masters and all that comes around? So when you make the artists and producers understand the whole net that involves money and seeing the content as the main asset, assets now are really important for them to get money and being paid. So, I mean, as Agnès brilliantly said, we should educate our partners as well. It's a whole process, and this is key for the industry to keep evolving the right way.
Well, I'm just going to say one thing then, which I completely agree with you, but I think there's one very, 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 very important thing, which is go to Latin America. Everyone in this industry has to go to Latin America, has to experience it, has to understand how it works and talk to people and feel it. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward. I know, like, there's a lot of decisions being made in the headquarters of companies, you know, in our business, to be really frank with all of you, and then some of them do not consider the cultural aspects of the region. Like, we cannot compare this region to other regions, you know, like there's regions of Africa that are super well developed now, you know, like going super fast. In Southeast Asia as well, we're seeing a lot of growth in the music business, but every region has, you know, their set of particularities. So we have to consider Latin America, and I'm talking about Latin America because we're Latins, but for every region in the world, just feel it, go there, watch it, understand the way people behave, and then let's make policies for that. Invest in Latin America. We're growing very, very rapidly. Just last year, we saw like a rate of growth in 18% in the recording music business in Brazil, 25% in Mexico. Chile is growing very fast as well. Argentina, every one of them. So. The growth rate is really fast and it's really big and it's going to keep up, but we have to make this sustainable because the way it is now, I think we're bound to have problems in the future. So let's keep on investing, let's keep on moving forward, but let's really understand how that market works.
There's one little thing that I'd like to close on. We're saying that basically glocalization it's actually quite common in many territories, right? Like, I mean, Japan, I'm saying Taku, you know, we thought that, although, okay, streaming is maybe not as developed in Japan, it's true that we thought it would be very, very, you know, more, again, global, and at the end of the day, 90% of content is Nippon, right? And we're seeing a similar trend, but something that's interesting is that apparently now, you know, Latin content is now being more and more consumed globally. So it's actually, we were so wrong. Can you maybe give me a take on that? And then we have maybe 3 minutes for questions if need be.
Okay, I'm going to give you a really quick one. I think what we're seeing now, like specifically in the U.S. market, which is, you know, what's driving a lot of attention with a subgenre of Mexican music called corridos, which is what Peso Pluma is doing, you know, Javi, so many others. It has to do with, like, I would say majorly with the diaspora. So there's 20% of the United States nowadays is Latin. So that means more than 60 million people. And those people are streaming in the US So that means they're paying for US music subscriptions, which then reverts into payouts for the artists in US dollars at a much higher rate than the rest of Latin America. So I think that it has to do with diaspora, but I'll leave you to it, Cris.
No, for sure, yeah. I mean, and you're seeing like Brazilian content like exploding in Portugal and Latin content from countries like Mexico, Chile, exploding in Spain. So it's a momentum. But I still miss having like Portuguese songs, Brazilian content being exploited and be back on the global map as in the past. Language is not a barrier anymore, so we should better exchange our cultures and, succeed.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, language barriers are not that big anymore. Like, I even see it with my band, I go to Spotify for artists, and like, US is like our third market, and we sing melodic metal in Spanish. And it's interesting. In the case of Chile, we also have this phenomena that we discussed in our call, like Chilean reggaeton and trap music. There's a huge scene now, like very big names, and it's not like one big artist or two or three, it's like a whole scene, like hundreds of guys like doing their tracks and beats, and it's scaling like really, really fast.
And it's a really beautiful scene, by the way. We're also seeing the same movement we talked about. It's happening in Chile right now, like the inversion of the charts. So there's a lot more, local artists reaching the top of the charts and dominating more than foreign content.
Yeah, according to Spotify, Santiago is the reggaeton capital of the world.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
What does Deezer say about that?
Deezer agrees.
On that note, I think we're good. So, relatability, autonomy, sorry, with a French accent, culture, education. I think that's a bingo. Are there any questions in the Californian scene here for our experts? Yes.
I was thinking about this localization. Another trend we also see is that independent distributors and record labels are also taking a bigger market share. Do you think those are...
Take mine, because I'm not speaking.
Thank you. You were talking about localization, and another trend that I have noticed is independent distributors and record labels also taking a bigger market share. So do you think it's because of that, or just a trend because of localization that these independents are taking a bigger market share? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I can start it, and I'll let Cris answer from the record label side. I think, yes, it has to do with it, because we've seen this in Brazil. More independent labels, they're more reactive to whatever cultural trends are happening, new music genres, subgenres, and whatnot. So they react faster, they draw attention to those artists, and that generates a lot of impulse in the industry, right? So I think from a very practical perspective, yes, it has to do 100% with it.
Yeah, the industry is moving, and if you think about the major companies in the past, it's completely different today. So they do not even record songs anymore. So they hire producers, independent producers. So I think this is a movement, but I also see, it's not something that I'm predicting, I'm seeing some major also acquiring this independent distro. So it's a movement that we are always seeing. So I do believe that it helps, but it's not all.
Hi, I'm Thomas from the Gamer from the German Royalty Society Collection Society. Sorry, and I was just wondering, how is the industry keeping track of all these developments and artists popping up in smaller territories as well? Since Are there any A&Rs left in those countries? Or is this, or are there tools, are there data tracking tools you're using to keep track of that?
I would say data. I mean, we are always mapping opportunities around. We work in a super independent way, so even under a major umbrella. So we use many different tools, like we do our internal tools, and we have the access to the big data, of course, but we try to map and find these potential artists through our label partners and storefront labels, trying to find the next one.
I think on our end, there's a lot. I mean, I see from labels as well that they're, as we're talking about local content and the importance of being super, super local, we as a DSP, we do deploy very local specialists. It's been our strategy since day one. So we hire people that are really specialized in local genres, and they really dig, into so many different music genres to find what's happening, like really, really small artists that can break. And then we've seen that, so for once, we exchange a lot of that verbally in meetings with our label partners. So there's been, in Brazil and Latin America, we have a project that's actually a global one called Deezer Next. So it's designed to find emerging talents all over the world. Many of those artists that we put as Deezer Next in Brazil and Latin America signed to big distros and major labels, after a while. So they're looking for that, So on the other hand, I think labels like Virgin and many others, they're also betting and doubling down on really finding people on the ground, be it in a very small country, but if they have at least one person looking out and finding the real talent, I'm sure they're going to do it. So I think I've seen this happen more and more over time. There's a lot more investment coming to the local markets, and Cris can talk a lot about that. But we see, as a DSP, we see major labels, distros, small, independent, whatever. They're really doubling down on very, very local and very small artists that can break, and be the next big stars of tomorrow.
Yeah, that will also depend a lot on the territory. Like if you have a strong PRO in your country, then there's probably more availability or access to data. In Chile, we do have a strong PRO, but there is not much public access to what they are tracking. But once a year, they release a report called Chile País de Músicos, I think. They released the new one a few weeks ago. Where they go through the latest trends, the charts and stuff. And then we also had this project, the Chilean Observatory for Digital Music, that created these methodologies and reports on the state of the music industry, recorded live music tech. That was a publicly funded project for 4 or 5 years, so we don't have any funding anymore, but we're trying to bring it back to life because they are very valuable resources, and also a platform that was developed to track Chilean artists on music platforms. That was very interesting.
My mic does not work. Hello. Right. I think that's a closing. Well, I'm looking at the California folks that are not here, but maybe we could create a Latin Nornia, and I'll go to Latam and discover all the great technologies and projects we can do for the business. Thank you all for joining me and us. Thank you.